To quote Keanu Reeves, "I love movies. Gosh, I love movies." Hard same, Keanu. I love movies so much that I'll sit down and read through the screenplay for a film that I particularly enjoyed just to see how much or how little of it was on the page from the very start. Movies crucial to our cinematic consciousness have rough drafts, or yikes, final drafts that were not at all the man we married. Here are 10 films that changed drastically through rewrites.
I've witnessed train wrecks that weren't this ugly.
Star Wars: A New Hope hit theaters in 1977, and many of us can't imagine a culture of storytelling and referential humor without it. Even if you're one of the few who've never watched the Star Wars series, come on, you know it. Originally, the protagonist of Star Wars was not our darling Luke, but a girl of 16. The Farmorphin deets are the same, but the protagonist was in love with Han Solo. The fanfiction community would argue that those vibes stuck. There are plenty of other details that got shifted around though. Skywalker was not Luke's last name, but his title. Jedi Knights had call signs in early drafts, and Luke's surname was Starkiller. Subtle. Han Solo was originally an alien with gills, which one imagines would have deterred the equally no-frills Harrison Ford from taking on the role to begin with. The horror. A galaxy far, far away from what we saw on screen. Tim Burton's contribution to Batman lore is both a classic of superhero noir and controversial in its choices. The script the studios greenlit, however, was missing some of the most controversial changes Burton made. It seems like maybe the studio never planned to stray that far from the source material. On screen, Batman's parents are revealed to have been killed by a pre-clowned Joker, a thing that never happens in the comics. Batman kills, another change and comic no. Both choices were highly criticized by fans at the time. The screenplay even included Dick Grayson, and Marlon Wayans was cast. Con Air got the green light as a small drama by Scott Rosenberg, writer of subtle indie films. Producer Jerry Bruckheimer loved the danger-laden premise and the crazy character names, Diamond Dog, Cyrus the Virus, but the man responsible for Top Gun wanted to go bigger. Director Simon West wanted more widescreen-worthy action. Nicolas Cage wanted, well, whatever it is that Nicolas Cage wants. Cage insisted upon the southern drawl and his character Cameron Poe's army background, serving the tonally confusing opening sequence that shifts from military B-roll footage to a dive bar in Alabama with Trisha Yearwood blasting over a tender spousal reunion. Depending on who you ask, the first John Wick did anything from revitalize to revolutionize action on the big screen. Each sequential film has added not just impressive gun-fu and set pieces, but overall lore. John Wick was originally titled Scorn and focused on a retired assassin much older than Keanu. That screenplay only features 3 kills and doesn't force the protagonist into real do-or-die survival situations. We have Chad Stahelski to thank for introducing more fight choreography and raising the stakes, as well as adding those touches of mythology. That addition was Stahelski seeing the potential of the story and following his instincts as a mythology nerd. It's hard to imagine the John Wick universe without those juicy details that the sequels have been, and we imagine will continue to be built upon. Now, Stahelski got his start as a stunt double alongside the son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee, Brandon Lee. So he was crucial to this next film on our list, The Crow. This is another on our list pulled from comics or graphic novels, but its transformation entirely removed from the act of adaptation is unbelievable. Several characters were cut during the screenplay during production. Producer Ed Pressman added an older brother for plucky skateboarder Sarah in his final rewrites. An unnamed secondary villain was cut at Brandon Lee's request after the first read. Lee felt that the character, an Asian man of political influence, power-hungry, and pursuit of magic, was stereotypical. Skull Cowboy, a prominent character in the comics, was cut after the tragic passing of Lee to rework montage sequences to splice in Lee's limited-in-time emotive performance with action-led shots. The focus on physicality as emotional expression adds a haunting heart to this film about love, loss, and how we endure. They spared no expense on rewrites. Jurassic Park originated in the mind of author Michael Crichton, published in 1990, with the film releasing in 1993, turning millennials everywhere into children a little too interested in dinosaurs. What many would argue is the most important part of Jurassic Park almost never happened. Jeff Goldblum. Screenwriter Scotch Marmo wrote the eccentric mathematician out of the story, handing his concerns about science's arrogance to Grant. Luckily, Spielberg felt like something was missing, and screenwriter David Cope had a final look. He added Dr. Ian Malcolm back in and made room for humor. I think we know how well Goldblum ran with that.
Well, there it is. There it is.
David Cope also cut the film's planned climax of a wild chase down a river. Now, this part is actually straight from the book. Rexy forced Grant and the kids to hop into the river and outmaneuver, raft, and swim from the beast. Instead, Cope suggested the tram tour that inspired the rides. And we've never looked at a porta potty the same. Our next film is kind of a big deal. 16 years later, Anchorman, starring Will Ferrell, remains an oft-quoted and most beloved member of Judd Apatow's quirky, character-driven comedies. But the comedy masquerading as a 1970s newsroom romance once didn't include the newsroom. Anchorman began as a flight to a news convention with many anchormen on board. Ron Burgundy convinced the pilot he knew how to fly, crashed the plane, and the rest of the film unfolded as a parody of the 90s film Alive. Yep, that's right, our California classic was almost brutal, building jokes around cannibalism.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Director Paul Thomas Anderson, of all people, was committed to getting the comedy produced and suggested they changed directions. It would still get the go-ahead as a very different film. The original antagonists in Anchorman were a group of hippie bank robbers called the Alarm Clock. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man films are as loved as they are hated by lovers of all things comic book movies, but they were almost the James Cameron Spider-Mans? Reportedly, Cameron was required to turn in a script that could be filmed under a budget of $60 million before he got the writer's fee, and as you know, a real man makes his own luck. And cashes his own checks. Cameron quickly signed off on a revised script that had been bouncing around between as many as 6 screenwriters at Columbia Pictures for years. The script saw Dr. Octopus as the primary villain and as Peter Parker's college professor. He had a sidekick, really, named Wiener, really. This Doc Ock developed his gadget arms after being bitten by the same radioactive spider as Peter for some reason, and said okie dokie a lot. A whole lot. The project was reassigned to Sam Raimi, who brought in David Cope. Yes, the very same David Cope who saved Ian Malcolm. The rest is history. Stephen King's It already earned plenty of on-screen loyalty with horror aficionados from the 1990 miniseries, so people felt strongly about the decision to revamp it in 2017. Director Cary Fukunaga penned script 1 when he was tapped to direct. As we now know, Andy Muschietti would take over and also write and direct It Chapter 2. But this is almost the opposite of the Spider-Man situation. Muschietti honors the original script's form and structure, though the little changes added up. Or else it wouldn't be on this list. In Fukunaga's screenplay and in the novel, there's a rather disturbing, shall we say, mature scene for the Losers Club that caps their coming of age and trauma with even more trauma. Let's not get into that one any further. Muschietti instead gives Beverly March a richer solo journey about her abusive father. Still not a good time for Bev, but it centers her in her pain, offering catharsis and comfort in places, and the boys support Bev. Cleaning her blood-soaked bathroom and later bringing her back from the grasp of Pennywise's deadlights. Muschietti took the implied shape-shifting and custom torture abilities of Pennywise from Fukunaga's script and put them on screen. Sequences where Pennywise shifts relied primarily on practical effects, adding more scares, giving the child actors more to work with. The Scream franchise entered our nightmares in 1996. People flocked to theaters to see this classic slasher meets bold new subversion on the genre, and the pressure was on to deliver for the sequel. Filming had already started on Scream 2 when scripts were leaked, and fans had a lot to say. Cotton Weary, falsely convicted of killing Sidney Prescott's mother after circumstantial evidence and manipulated testimony, was set to be the sequel's antagonist, teaming up with Sidney's college roommate and new boyfriend for a spree. This ruined the gray character Weary was set to become and ultimately did become. How was he going to accomplish all of this when he couldn't even get out of a murder charge? With help from Billy Loomis's mother. The final product saved Weary and didn't swing in Sydney's boyfriend for cheap betrayal. Mrs. Loomis still orchestrated, but disguised herself as reporter Debbie Salt, getting in the way of Sydney and Gail Weathers, only revealing at the end her identity and sociopathy. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. These changes made more sense and inspired the Greek tragedy set piece, making the most cinematically striking moments in the series. And can I be honest with you? I haven't moved on from that whole T-Rex chases you down a river version of Jurassic Park. In a way, I think it'd be freeing. Just me, the current, and a beautiful lady dinosaur. Much better than rock, paper, scissors. If you live, does it count as one of those mud runs? Ah, heck, is that what CrossFit is training us for?